Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. From the moment Uju stepped into the banquet hall, holding Chitty's arm, every head turned. Her skin glowed like it had been kissed by sunlight. Her fitted gown sparkled with every graceful step, and her smile was a mask of perfection. To the untrained eye, she was every man's dream. Polite, intelligent, soft-spoken, and cultured. Chitty beamed with pride as he introduced her to his family and friends at the engagement pre-dinner, believing, without a doubt, that he had found the woman of his dreams. To him, Uju was the symbol of grace and humility. A woman who didn't let her beauty cloud her sense of decency. What Chitty didn't know, and what most people failed to see, was that behind the gentle eyes and sweet laughter was a woman who had mastered the art of pretense. Uju knew exactly how to win hearts. She had studied it, practiced it, and perfected it. And in this gathering of wealth and class, her main goal wasn't just to marry into a rich family, but to secure a future of power, control, and influence. She had her eyes on the bigger prize, becoming the lady of the mansion. As Chitty introduced her to his mother, Uju knelt ever so delicately, bowed her head, and called her mummy, with a tone so convincing it melted even the elderly woman's initial skepticism. "She's so respectful," Chitty's mother had whispered to his aunt with a smile. But later, when the old woman stepped away, Uju rolled her eyes and whispered to her friends seated nearby, "They dress like they're rich, but you'd think they own a sewing machine, not a company." Her friend stifled a laugh, but the tone revealed what Uju truly thought of the people she was trying to impress. In private, she was quick to mock anyone who didn't meet her standards of glamour. The security man's accent, the cook's old-fashioned uniform, the driver's rusty shoes. Even as she smiled and posed for pictures, her mind was busy calculating who she would command, who she would replace, and who she would tolerate once she married Chitty. She didn't love him, not truly, but she loved his last name. The Obinas were one of the wealthiest families in Lagos, owners of estates, schools, transport companies, and oil blocks. Marrying Chitty wasn't about love. It was her golden ticket. That evening, as the guests enjoyed dinner, Uju pretended to be interested in Chitty's conversations about community service and philanthropic goals. She nodded sweetly when he talked about how his father started from nothing and built everything from scratch. In her head, she scoffed. "Who cares about all that?" she thought. "Just hand me the gold spoon already." When one of the waiters accidentally spilled a drop of wine on her sleeve, she clenched her fist in anger, but remembered the cameras and the eyes watching. She forced a fake smile and whispered through gritted teeth, "Be careful next time. These clothes cost more than your entire salary." The waiter bowed quickly, trying to apologize, but Uju had already turned away. Moments later, she leaned her head on Chitty's shoulder, whispering softly, "Everyone here is so nice. I feel like I belong already." He smiled, wrapping his arm around her, oblivious to the poison behind her words. That was her talent, smiling sweetly as she stabbed with words, fooling everyone around her. But the house she thought she would rule had secrets too, and someone was watching her more closely than she realized. The weeks that followed the engagement party were filled with visits, dinners, and planning sessions. Uju played her role perfectly, always affectionate with Chitty, always agreeable in front of his family. But the moment she was alone with the staff, her tone turned venomous. On one particular day, the house cook, Mama Ebra, brought in a tray of snacks for her and placed it on the center table. Uju didn't even wait for her to leave the room before scoffing. "Is this what you call puff puff?" she sneered. "Do you want me to add food poisoning to my list of wedding stress?" Mama Ebra bowed her head, trying to apologize, but Uju waved her off. "Go and tell whoever taught you to cook that you're not fit to boil water." The insult stung the older woman, who had been with the Obina family for over 25 years. But out of respect for Chitty and fear of losing her job, she kept quiet. Uju, satisfied with her dominance, smiled to herself and called her friend on the phone. "They're all beneath me, Amaka. I'm just playing along until the wedding. Then I'll put everyone in their place." To Chitty, however, Uju was the image of perfection. She was soft-spoken, always eager to hear about his business meetings, and showered him with praise. She helped him organize charity events, and even visited his company's outreach program for orphan children, only to complain later about how dirty those places are. Chitty's heart swelled every time she kissed his forehead and said she was proud of him. Her manipulative charm knew no bounds. During a family meeting, Uju gifted Chitty's mother an expensive wrapper and knelt to present it like a true daughter-in-law. "I hope to be even half the woman you are," she said with a rehearsed sincerity. His mother was touched, but not entirely convinced. There was something about Uju's eyes, too calculating, too empty, that left her unsettled. She watched how the maids avoided eye contact with Uju, and how the gardener mumbled whenever Uju walked by. Still, no one had any real evidence. So she said nothing, keeping her suspicions quiet. Chitty, blinded by love and Uju's false humility, couldn't see the red flags all around him. One evening, Uju walked into the kitchen to find the housemaid, Ifioma, humming to herself while preparing a fruit tray. "Are you singing for joy because you have a job, or because you're too foolish to realize how replaceable you are?" Uju snapped. Ifioma was stunned and tried to apologize. "I'm sorry, madam. I didn't mean any harm." Uju stepped closer, her voice low but sharp. "Next time I catch you singing in my presence, I'll have you sent back to the village. This is not a music school." The girl nodded, holding back tears, but just then Chitty's footsteps approached. Like a flip of a switch, Uju's tone turned sweet. "Ifioma, please don't forget to add bananas for Daddy," she said kindly. Chitty walked in smiling. "You two seem to be getting along well." Ifioma glanced at Uju, confused and afraid. Uju responded with a warm laugh. "She's my little helper. So hard-working." The manipulation ran so deep that even those suffering under her rule couldn't keep up with the dual personalities. Chitty remained clueless. But not everyone in the house was fooled. Chief Obinna had been observing from the shadows. Ada, Chitty's cousin and closest confidant, had long been skeptical about Uju's intentions. As someone who had lived in the mansion since childhood and worked as the family's legal advisor, she'd seen many women come and go, some genuinely loving, others opportunistic. But there was something especially unsettling about Uju. During one afternoon tea, she watched as Uju scolded the driver for not opening the car door fast enough, and then turned around to praise Chitty for being such a patient and understanding fiancé. That dual behavior disturbed her deeply. When she tried to bring it up gently, Chitty brushed her off. "You're just being protective," he said. "Uju is nothing like the others. She's perfect." Ada persisted. "Perfection isn't real, Chitty. I've seen how the staff flinch when she enters. They're scared of her." Chitty laughed it off. "They're just not used to her high standards. She's not rude, she's just meticulous." That word, meticulous, became his excuse every time Uju crossed a line. Ada felt helpless. She didn't want to seem jealous or controlling, so she decided to watch from a distance. But her instincts told her a storm was coming. The tension in the household grew steadily. The staff communicated in whispers whenever Uju was around. Many of them were now working out of fear, not loyalty. Mama Ebra, the cook, began praying aloud in the kitchen before work, asking God for strength to endure the spirit of wickedness in human form. The younger staff called Uju Ojuju Calabar behind her back, a ghostly nickname that reflected how quickly she switched faces. One day, Uju found a small burn mark on her dress after the maid ironed it. Instead of asking calmly, she dragged the maid to the living room and shouted in front of Chitty's mother, "This thing you hired doesn't know her left from right. Look what she's done." The maid fell to her knees, crying. Chitty's mother tried to calm Uju down, saying it was a mistake. But Uju stormed off, muttering, "When I become the lady of this house, I'll clear all this nonsense." That statement lingered heavily in the air. Chitty's mother locked eyes with the maid, then looked toward the corridor. She suspected someone else had heard that comment. Chief Obinna had been standing at the end of the hall, silently watching. Later that night, Chief Obinna sat in his study, replaying the entire scene in his mind. He remembered Uju's sweet smile when they first met and compared it to the fiery demon who insulted his loyal staff. A businessman to the core, he believed in second chances, but not in fools. He called his wife into the room. "That girl is hiding something," he said. "She wears a mask, and our son is too blinded to see it." His wife sighed, nodding. "But what can we do? If we interfere too directly, Chitty will think we're trying to control his life." Obinna thought for a moment, then made a decision. "I'll find out for myself. Let's see how she behaves when she thinks no one important is watching." The next morning, he gave the family driver specific instructions. "Bring me old clothes. And keep your mouth shut." Chief Obinna was going to test Uju the only way a father could. By the time she would realize who he really was, it might be too late to undo the damage her pride had caused. 2 weeks later, the grand engagement party was held in the family's private estate. Decorated with crystal chandeliers, silk linens, and a fountain centerpiece that danced to slow classical music, the event was the talk of the town. Guests arrived in expensive cars, socialites paraded designer labels, and the media buzzed at the gates. Uji shone like a goddess in her wine-colored mermaid gown, her diamond earrings sparkling under the lights. She smiled, curtsied, and posed for every camera. Her performance was flawless. In front of Chitty's friends, she talked about building orphanages and empowering women. In front of the elders, she quoted scriptures and Yoruba proverbs she had memorized the night before. Chitty looked at her like he'd won the lottery, constantly kissing her hand and whispering how lucky he was. Uju smiled sweetly and replied, "No, I'm the lucky one." But deep inside, all she saw were opportunities, connections to exploit, alliances to form, and enemies to silence. This night wasn't about love. It was about elevation. She didn't want to marry into the Obinna family. She wanted to control it. As the evening progressed, Chief Obinna, disguised as a frail old house assistant in oversized clothes and dark shades, quietly observed her from the sidelines. He had instructed his staff to refer to him only as Baba for the night. No one knew, not even Chitty. As he walked past with a tray, he saw Uju pinch a waiter under her breath for blocking her shine in a photo. Moments later, she laughed loudly at a joke one of the governors made, pretending to be impressed by his stories. Her ability to switch tones like a chameleon disturbed him deeply. When he walked too close to her seat while cleaning up a napkin, she turned sharply. "Can't you see someone is seated here? Must you bump into me like a rag?" she snapped. He bowed quickly. "Sorry, madam." She hissed and pushed his arm away, muttering, "God punish poverty." Chitty, busy entertaining friends, didn't hear a thing. But Obinna's heart sank. This was no misunderstanding. This was who she truly was. Toward the end of the night, Uju approached the high table and greeted everyone sweetly. She knelt before Chitty's mother again, this time with more dramatics, saying, "I hope to be your daughter not just in name, but in service." The crowd clapped. Chitty beamed. Chief Obinna, still in disguise, simply watched with a heavy heart. He had seen enough. Her pride, her deceit, her cruelty, they were hidden behind powdered cheeks and designer shoes. But a storm was coming, and it would only take one moment, one slap, for all her lies to come crashing down. The morning after the lavish engagement party, the mansion was unusually quiet. While the guests had left singing praises of Uju's beauty and elegance, the mood among the Obinna household staff was far from celebratory. Chitty's mother, Lady Grace, sat quietly in the family lounge, sipping her tea, without her usual elegance. Her brows were furrowed, her heart heavy with unspoken doubts. The events of the night before replayed in her mind, especially the moment she saw the way Uju scolded one of the servers before switching into a glowing smile the moment Chitty walked in. It was not the act itself that unsettled her, but the smoothness of the transition, like someone who had done it many times. Lady Grace had been in high society for decades. She knew how to spot masks, and she feared Uju wore the prettiest mask of them all. Still, without proof, all she had were instincts, and instincts were not enough to challenge a woman her son adored. Meanwhile, Chitty remained blissfully unaware, basking in the afterglow of a successful event. He called Uju early that morning to thank her. "You were amazing," he said. "My parents are warming up to you." I could see it. Uju laughed delicately and said, That's all I've ever wanted, baby. To be part of your beautiful family. She spoke those words with such sweetness that even Chitty's heart swelled. After the call, Uju stood by her mirror, admiring herself. Let them keep watching, she whispered. Soon, I'll be the one they all kneel for. Her arrogance was growing like a weed, fed by success, watered by deception. She had learned to speak the right words, smile at the right times, and charm everyone who mattered. But for those who didn't matter, the staff, the poor, the weak, she showed no mercy. The deeper her lies rooted themselves, the harder they became to untangle. And while Chitty was falling deeper in love, his father had already seen enough to begin taking quiet action. Chief Obinna, now fully convinced that Uju was not who she pretended to be, began his personal investigation. He didn't want to rely on hearsay or gossip. He wanted her to expose herself. He invited his old friend, retired Judge Olufemi, to lunch and asked if he could discreetly look into Uju's background. Check her school records, her work history, even her friends, he said. I want to know who she is when no one's watching. Judge Olufemi agreed. As this plan was set in motion, Obinna continued to wear his disguise in the house occasionally, pretending to be a cleaner while observing Uju. The staff had already been warned not to mention his real identity. Day by day, he watched her demand, insult, manipulate, and pretend. The more he saw, the more his heart ached for his son. Chitty was a good man, kind, loyal, and trusting. He didn't deserve to marry a woman who saw people as tools. But Chief Obinna knew that stopping the wedding wouldn't be enough. He had to make Chitty see the truth for himself, and that truth would be painful. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when the incident with the new maid occurred, an incident that would later become one of the many cracks in Uju's carefully built facade. Her new gown, a custom design ordered from a boutique in Paris, had just arrived, and she had demanded it be pressed and hung in her temporary guest room at the Obinna mansion. Ifeoma, the young, timid maid who had been hired just 3 days before, gently took the gown and began to iron it. A small, almost invisible burn mark appeared on the inside seam of the dress. Panicking, Ifeoma immediately ran to Uju to confess. But Uju, who had just come down from a call with her tailor, didn't even wait for a full explanation. Are you stupid? She screamed. Do you know how much this dress costs? It's worth more than your miserable life. Before the girl could respond, Uju raised her hand and slapped her across the face, not once, but twice. The maid fell to her knees, sobbing. Please, madam, I didn't mean it. Unfortunately for Uju, this time, she wasn't alone. Chitty's younger cousin, Emeka, who had returned from the UK 2 nights earlier, witnessed the entire scene from the hallway. He was appalled. Without hesitation, he walked into the room and confronted her. What is wrong with you? He asked. You slapped her for an accident? She came to you honestly, and you assaulted her. Uju froze, not expecting anyone to have seen it. Quickly, regaining composure, she switched tones. You don't understand, she said softly. She's careless. She could have ruined everything. And it's not the first time. Emeka wasn't buying it. Even if she made a mistake, what gives you the right to hit someone? Uju, now realizing this might reach Chitty, turned defensive. Are you trying to sabotage me? Is this jealousy? Emeka shook his head. No, Uju. I just don't trust anyone who treats people like trash when no one's watching. That night, he quietly reported what happened to Ada, who simply nodded and said, We need to gather more. Soon, the mask will fall. Ifeoma, on the other hand, packed her small bag and left the mansion that night. She didn't speak to anyone, didn't file a complaint, didn't even collect her full salary. She just vanished, traumatized and shaken. The next morning, Chitty noticed her absence and asked what happened. Uyu lita fortlessly. She said the job was too demanding. I tried to convince her to stay, but she seemed unstable. Chitty frowned, but didn't press further. That's strange. She seemed eager when she started. Uju kissed his cheek and replied, Some people just aren't cut out for great environments. Her manipulation worked again, at least on Chitty. But Ada and Emeka knew better. They began quietly documenting everything. Chief Obinna, too, received daily updates from the head steward. The web was closing in. Uju had no idea how close she was to being exposed. And yet, her arrogance only grew. The more she got away with, the more untouchable she felt. But pride, when left unchecked, is always followed by a fall. The atmosphere in the mansion had shifted. What was once a home full of laughter and tradition was now clouded by tension and silent judgment. Uju remained her usual self in front of Chitty, sweet, thoughtful, and soft-spoken. But behind closed doors, her behavior had grown worse. She now walked through the mansion like a queen in waiting, barking orders at staff and reminding everyone that she would soon be their madam in charge. One afternoon, she interrupted a staff meeting between the butler and the housekeepers to scold them for not cleaning the gold figurines to her satisfaction. "Are you blind?" she snapped. "You want the guests to think this family is filthy?" When the head butler calmly reminded her that Chief Obinna had specifically said not to touch the antique items, Uju raised her voice and shouted, "Then tell your chief that if he doesn't want things done properly, he should hire people with sense." The staff stood frozen. She had unknowingly insulted the man who owned the very house she walked in. But her confidence was unshaken. Chitty remained oblivious. That evening, while they had dinner alone in the garden, he held her hands and said, "You know, I feel blessed to have you. Not just because of your beauty, but because of your heart." Uju giggled, blushing on cue. "You're the one who brings out the best in me," she replied. He smiled, completely captivated. "My father is still hard to read, but I think he'll come around." Uju nodded, thinking, "He'll come around once I take control." Every time Chitty mentioned his father, she suppressed her distaste. Chief Obinna had been distant with her, too silent, too observant. Something about him made her uncomfortable. But she convinced herself it was because he was old-fashioned. In her arrogance, she didn't believe anyone could truly see through her. To her, they were all just characters in a script she controlled. But the real script was being written behind her back, and in it, she was not the hero, but the tragedy. Meanwhile, Ada and Emeka intensified their quiet investigations. They began speaking to former classmates, old coworkers, and even the security guards from Uju's previous estate. The stories were consistent. Uju was rude, manipulative, and obsessed with power. One disturbing detail came from a former roommate who revealed how Uju once reported her to immigration out of jealousy and almost got her deported. "She can ruin lives with a smile," the girl said. When Ada shared these findings with Chief Obinna, he listened in silence and then nodded slowly. "She's not just proud," he said. "She's dangerous." The plan was now clear. Obinna would give her one final test, a situation where no one important was watching. No cameras, no witnesses, no expectations. Just her and a decision. If she failed, the wedding would be off. And if she passed, well, miracles could happen. But deep down, Chief Obinna already knew what would happen. The girl his son loved was a storm in disguise, and storms always leave destruction behind. The whispers in the mansion grew louder, not in volume, but in intensity. The staff, though still cautious, began sharing their fears and frustrations among themselves. "She thinks we're slaves," the gardener said bitterly one morning as he trimmed the roses Uju had trampled on while filming a social media skit. The cook, Mama Ebra, added, "And she doesn't know she's dancing on the lion's tail." What once used to be a peaceful household had now become a tense battlefield, with the Obinna family employees walking on eggshells and looking over their shoulders, terrified that one misstep could result in public embarrassment or even physical assault. But in the eye of this storm stood Uju, unbothered, unaware, and unrepentant. To her, everyone below her status was disposable. She had won Chitty's love and was months away from marrying into wealth, and in her mind, nothing could stop her anymore. Chief Obinna watched all of this unfold from the shadows. Now almost always dressed in simple clothes and wearing the guise of a house assistant, he was virtually invisible to Uju. She didn't even greet him when he passed, only occasionally ordering him to move aside or clean faster. The disrespect only fueled his resolve. He noted every act of wickedness she displayed, how she berated a pregnant stewardess for walking too slow, how she mocked a driver's accent, and how she once threatened to slap the gatekeeper for opening the gate 1 second too late. She saw herself as royalty already. But Obinna had learned a long time ago that the best test of a person's character wasn't how they treated the powerful, but how they treated the powerless. He had given her every opportunity to show kindness in private, to behave with dignity when no one was watching. But she failed each one miserably. He knew the day of reckoning was near. Ada and Emeka continued gathering evidence. They even compiled a file of testimonies, printed WhatsApp messages, and character references. Chidi, however, remained distant from all of this. He was still in his bubble, distracted by wedding preparations and blinded by Uju's constant declarations of love. "She's everything I ever prayed for," he said to Ada one day. "She completes me." Ada wanted to scream. How could someone so smart be so foolish? But she bit her tongue and nodded silently. It wasn't her place to force the truth down his throat. He had to see it for himself. And that day was coming fast. Plans were quietly underway for a family service weekend, a tradition in the Obinna family where everyone, including spouses and fiancés, participated in community service without staff help. Uju had been invited under the pretense of helping with the mansion's spring cleaning. But what she didn't know was that a carefully orchestrated trap had been set, and the bait, dressed in rags and humility, was none other than Chief Obinna himself. The morning of the test dawned with mild harmattan, dust floating in the air, and birds chirping lazily across the garden. Uju had overslept slightly, irritated by the fact that she had to wake up early to assist with house cleaning. She wore a simple designer top and leggings, but still managed to look like someone headed to a brunch in Banana Island. As she descended the stairs, she frowned at the broom placed at the foot of the staircase. "Is this some kind of village joke?" she asked aloud. But when Chidi approached, looking cheerful and relaxed, she forced a smile. "Babe, you didn't tell me I had to sweep. I thought we were going for a family meeting." Chidi chuckled. "This is part of the family tradition, my love. Everyone joins. Even my mom and I cleaned the backyard last year." Uju laughed nervously, then leaned in to kiss his cheek. "Well, anything for you." But inside she was fuming. She hated getting her hands dirty, and more than that, she hated being seen as ordinary. Chief Obinna stood in the corridor, again dressed in his worn-out cleaner's clothes, watching. He waited silently for the moment to begin. As Uju joined the others in the compound, sweeping and cleaning with exaggerated grace whenever Chidi was watching, she noticed the old cleaner walking past with a bin. As he moved close to where she stood, he accidentally bumped into her elbow, smearing a faint line of ash on her leggings. That was it. Uju lost it. "You filthy idiot. Are you blind? Do you know how much these cost?" she screamed, drawing everyone's attention. The man mumbled an apology and tried to wipe it off gently. But in a move that shocked even the staff watching from afar, Uju raised her hand and slapped him. Hard. The sharp sound of the slap echoed across the compound. "You should be working in the gutter, not here," she snapped. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Chidi, who had been inside the house, came running at the noise. "What's going on?" he asked, looking around. Uju immediately switched back to her sweet tone. "This man spilled dirt on me and raised his voice. I had to discipline him." Before Chidi could speak further, Chief Obinna stood up straight, slowly removing his hat, his glasses, and finally the jacket that disguised him. He looked Uju in the eye and said in a voice filled with calm thunder, "So you discipline the poor with slaps?" The color drained from Uju's face. Chidi blinked, confused. "Dad." Uju staggered backwards. "Wait, no, you can't be." But it was too late. The mask had fallen. Her humiliation was complete. And for the first time, her weapon, her mouth, was completely silent. The silence that followed Chief Obinna's reveal was deafening. The entire compound, including the house staff and extended family members who had come to participate in the tradition, stood in shock. Chidi's eyes remained fixed on his father's face, still trying to process what just happened. The man he admired most, the symbol of wisdom and dignity in their household, had been slapped by the woman he was about to marry. And worse, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate, malicious act fueled by pride and superiority. Uju's lips trembled as she tried to speak, but no words came. Her eyes darted around like a trapped animal, searching for a lifeline, a face that would defend her. But everyone stared in cold disbelief. Even Chitty's mother shook her head in quiet sorrow, her eyes glistening with disappointment. "She's not just arrogant," she whispered to Ada. "She's dangerous." Chitty finally turned to her. "Is this who you really are?" he asked, his voice low but heavy with pain. Uju's eyes filled with tears instantly, and she reached for him. "Baby, I didn't know he looked like a common. I thought he was someone else." She realized too late how damaging her words were. Chitty flinched as though he'd been struck. "A common what, Uju?" he asked bitterly. "A person beneath you? Someone not worth kindness?" She dropped to her knees. "Please, it was a mistake. I was upset, I didn't mean to." But Chief Obinna raised his hand. "Enough." His voice cut through her plea. "Every time you thought no one important was watching, you showed your true colors. And today, in front of everyone, you proved who you are." He turned to his son. "The decision is yours. But if she enters this family, I will leave this house." That statement hung like a curse in the air. A tear slid down Chitty's face, and for the first time in his adult life, he felt utterly betrayed, not just by the woman he loved, but by his own blindness. Uju sobbed uncontrollably, still on her knees, now surrounded by silence. Not a single person offered her a hand. Chitty stepped back slowly, then turned away. "Return the ring," he said quietly. "It's over." That broke her. She wailed, clutching at his leg, but he shook her off and walked inside. Staff began whispering. Emeka sighed and looked away. Ada held her mother's hand and whispered, "It's done." Uju remained in that position for over 20 minutes, crying as her makeup streamed down her cheeks, her perfectly curated world shattering around her. When she finally stood up, there was no applause, no comfort, no cameras. The only sound was the broom she had thrown earlier being swept across the concrete by a maid she had once threatened. The slap she had given out of pride had returned like a dagger, and it had sliced through every lie she had built. The Obinna mansion, once buzzing with wedding plans and celebratory cheer, fell into an eerie silence after the incident. No one dared to speak openly about what had happened, but it lingered in every glance and in the quiet footsteps echoing through the halls. Uju's belongings remained untouched in the guest room, but she had vanished from the premises the moment the guests dispersed. Chitty, heartbroken and humiliated, locked himself in his room for hours, refusing food, ignoring calls, and barely responding to his mother's gentle knocks. To love someone so deeply, to defend them despite countless warnings, only to realize it was all a lie, that pain sat like a blade in his chest. He couldn't bear to replay the moment his father revealed the truth. The look of betrayal in everyone's eyes, especially his own. He had vouched for Uju, fought for her against family objections, and in the end, she had slapped the very man who built everything he now enjoyed. Meanwhile, Uju sat in the back seat of a rideshare, her face buried in her hands, her tears mixing with the remnants of smeared mascara. The driver looked at her through the rearview mirror with quiet curiosity, but said nothing. When she finally arrived at her apartment, she was too ashamed to even greet her neighbors. She slipped inside like a fugitive, slammed the door shut, and collapsed on the tiled floor. For the first time in years, Uju felt naked, not physically, but emotionally. The power, the charm, the control, it was all gone. She was now just a woman who had publicly disgraced herself. Her phone buzzed continuously with missed calls, texts, and social media notifications. At first, she thought it might be Chitty reaching out to forgive her. But when she finally checked, her heart shattered again. The footage of the slap had been leaked online. Someone from the service day had captured the exact moment she struck Chief Obinna and uploaded it. The caption read, "Lady slaps billionaire CEO thinking he's a maid. Watch what happens next." The video went viral within hours. News blogs, influencers, and even local TV stations picked it up. Hashtags like #SlapOfShame and #PrideBeforeTheFall trended across platforms. The comment sections were ruthless. "She's beautiful, but evil. Thank God the man exposed her before the wedding. Imagine what she would have done if she had become madam." Uju's public image crumbled before her eyes. Brands she had previously modeled for began distancing themselves. Her publicist sent her a terse message. Damage control is nearly impossible. You might want to lay low indefinitely. That night, Uju stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman who once thought she could manipulate her way to the top now looked like a stranger. Broken, humiliated, and powerless. She whispered to herself, "This can't be the end." But deep down a gnawing voice replied, "It already is." The next morning, the Obina family held a private meeting in the main living room. Chitty sat in silence, his fingers interlocked, his mind far away. Chief Obina, calm but visibly tired, began the meeting by saying, "Let this be a lesson to all of us. Sometimes we protect people who are poisoning us because they wear perfume." No one laughed. Chitty's mother reached out and touched her son's hand. "We didn't want to hurt you, son," she said softly. "But we had to show you. If we didn't, she would have destroyed more than just your happiness." Chitty swallowed hard, tears forming in his eyes. "I was so sure. I believed in her. I thought I found my partner." He turned to his father. "I feel like a fool." Chief Obina shook his head. "You're not a fool. You're a good man. Good men fall because they want to see the best in others. But now you've seen her. The real her. Don't carry guilt, carry wisdom." Ada sat quietly beside Emeka, flipping through the printed file of evidence they had gathered. "She's left quite a trail," Ada said, placing a photo on the table. "From her former university incident to the roommate she nearly deported. All because they challenged her ego." Chitty glanced at the documents and shook his head in disbelief. "And I called her kind." The weight of embarrassment pressed heavily on his shoulders. "I introduced her to business partners. I took her to orphanage projects. I let her into every part of my life." There was a pause. "Do you want her prosecuted?" Emeka asked suddenly. "For assaulting your father?" The room grew silent. Chief Obina, ever composed, responded gently, "No. Let the world judge her. Sometimes disgrace is the harsher punishment." Chitty nodded slowly, though his heart still ached. He needed closure, but more than that, he needed healing. He excused himself and went to the balcony, the same spot where Uju once posed for pictures and talked about redesigning the mansion. Now, it all felt like a bad dream. Elsewhere, Uju faced her own reckoning. Calls from distant relatives flooded in, most of them not to offer comfort, but to berate her for ruining the family name. Her own mother refused to answer the phone for hours. When she finally did, her voice was cold. "After all I taught you, Uju? After all the warnings about pride?" Uju sobbed, but her mother continued, "You've disgraced us. You slapped a man that should have been your father-in-law. Do you know what people are saying?" Uju tried to explain, "I didn't know it was him." But her mother's response cut her like a blade. "That's the problem. Even if he was a cleaner, you had no right to slap anyone." The line went dead. Uju stared at the phone screen as if it had betrayed her. Her world was shrinking, and no one was coming to save her. She had spent so long building a throne on pride that she didn't notice it had no foundation. And now that it had collapsed, she was buried under the rubble of her own arrogance. 2 days later, Uju, no longer shielded by pride, walked up the Obina mansion's long driveway for the last time, dressed in plain black clothes, with no makeup and sandals instead of her usual heels. She looked like a shadow of the woman who once demanded respect with every step. Her hands trembled as she clutched a handwritten letter, an apology addressed to Chief Obina. Her knees felt weak, but she forced herself forward. The security men, who once bowed when she arrived in her luxury car, now looked at her with blank expressions. "I'm here to see Chief, please," she whispered. One of them radioed inside. A few minutes later, Ada came to the gate. She didn't smile, didn't greet, just stared. "You shouldn't have come here," she said. "I need to see him," Uju pleaded. "Please. Just a few minutes." Ada hesitated. "He won't listen." "Just let me try," Uju begged. Ada finally sighed and let her through, but added, "Whatever happens, don't raise your voice. Don't lie. He's heard enough of that." Inside, Uju stood before Chief Obina, who was seated calmly with a cup of tea. He didn't look up immediately. When he finally did, his eyes were tired but steady. Uju knelt instantly. Sir, I have no words. I failed you. I failed your family. I was foolish, proud, blind, please forgive me. She placed the letter at his feet, her voice trembling. I've lost everything. Chitty won't talk to me. My job is gone. The media won't leave me alone. I deserve it all. But I couldn't rest without saying sorry, not for forgiveness, but because you didn't deserve what I did. Chief Obinna listened quietly. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, he leaned forward. Uju, he said, you came here as a queen in your own eyes, and now you kneel in shame. That's not because of me. That's because of you. Every insult, every slap, every lie. You built your destruction. Uju's tears dropped to the floor. I know, she whispered. Chief Obinna picked up the letter, folded it, and placed it on the side table. There are wounds words can't heal, he said. You wounded my staff, my family, my son, and yourself. But this house doesn't return evil for evil. We forgive. But we don't forget. He stood up. You're not welcome here again. I pray you find peace. But you will not find it in this house. Then he walked away. Uju remained on her knees long after he had gone. Her sobs filled the hallway like a dirge. Eventually, Ada returned to escort her out, offering no words of comfort. As Uju walked back down the driveway, past the same trees and stones that once framed her dreams of grandeur, the sky opened up and rain began to fall. She didn't run. She let it soak her, as if trying to wash away the guilt. But water could not cleanse her conscience. She had climbed the ladder of pretense with pride, and now she was learning the long, painful way down. It had been 3 weeks since Uju's humiliating downfall, and the shame still clung to her like a second skin. Most of her friends had distanced themselves. Her social circle, once flooded with fake compliments and event invitations, had dried up. Even her favorite designer boutique, where she used to shop on credit and brag about being Chitty's fiancé, had politely turned her away when she walked in with her head down and no entourage. She had lost everything: reputation, relationships, and relevance. But what haunted her most wasn't the loss of luxury. It was the memory of Chief Obinna's eyes when he told her she wasn't welcome anymore. Those eyes carried a weight that pierced her soul: disappointment, sorrow, and finality. And that weight became heavier when she heard the news that broke her all over again. Chief Obinna had died of a sudden heart attack just days after their last conversation. The news hit her like a dagger. She hadn't expected it. She thought she'd have time to repair things someday, time to show she had changed, even if just a little. She had imagined writing him letters, proving her humility, maybe even working in a charity organization to redeem her image. But now all of that was gone. The chance for reconciliation, even a symbolic one, had vanished. She couldn't eat. She couldn't sleep. All she could think of was that last moment when she knelt before him and sobbed like a child, begging for forgiveness. Now he was gone, buried beneath the earth, his voice silenced forever. After several days of torment, she made a decision. She would visit his grave, not to seek more forgiveness, but to say goodbye. She wrote another letter, one soaked in raw emotion, confessions, and regret, and tucked it in a small envelope. Then she dressed in all black and made her way to the cemetery in secret. The sky was gray when she arrived at the Obinna family tomb. A gentle drizzle kissed the earth as she approached the marble headstone that bore his name, Chief Engr. Obinna K. Obinna, a man of honor. Her legs trembled, and she sank to her knees before it, her eyes red with unshed tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know you're not here to hear me anymore, but I'm sorry. For everything. For the slap. For the lies. For the pride. You didn't deserve it. No one did. She placed the letter gently at the base of the stone and collapsed into quiet sobs. The cemetery was empty, save for a caretaker who watched her from a distance, too respectful to approach. Uju stayed for hours, kneeling in the wet grass, whispering prayers to a man who could no longer answer them. In that moment, she felt smaller than she had ever been in her life, not because of loss, but because, for the first time, she truly understood what it meant to be broken. As the clouds thickened overhead and the drizzle turned into steady rain, Uju remained by the grave, her dress soaked and her hair clinging to her skin. She didn't care. It felt appropriate to suffer, almost necessary. She needed to feel discomfort, to feel punishment. She had spent years hiding behind silk and arrogance, stepping on others to rise higher, but now she knelt before a grave with nothing left but shame. The voices in her head were loud, merciless. You slapped him. You insulted him. You tried to become Madam by lies. It wasn't just the slap that haunted her. It was everything she had done. Every cruel word. Every malicious act. Every servant she had mocked. Every eye roll. Every scoff. Every entitled demand. The memories bombarded her with ruthless clarity, and she wept as if the world were ending. She wanted to crawl inside the grave and beg for Chief Obina's spirit to forgive her. Eventually, the cemetery caretaker approached, an umbrella in his hand. "Madam, you'll fall sick like this," he said gently. She looked up with swollen eyes. "I deserve it," she replied weakly. The man stood silently for a while, then said, "Deserving pain doesn't bring peace. Regret without change is just torture." His words pierced her. She looked at him, his face aged, his eyes kind. "Do you believe I can change?" she asked. He sighed. "Anyone can, but not everyone does." He handed her the umbrella. "Go home. This man you cry for was a great man. Honor him with the life you choose from now." Uju took the umbrella, her fingers trembling, and nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. She stood slowly, her body aching, her soul heavier than ever. As she walked away from the tombstone, she felt a small piece of peace settle into her chest, but it was surrounded by an ocean of sorrow that wouldn't go away. That evening, Uju returned to her apartment and locked the door behind her. The silence felt louder now. The once vibrant space filled with designer bags and photo shoots was now bare. Bills had piled up. Her internet had been disconnected. Even her neighbors gave her strange looks. She sat on the floor, hugged her knees, and whispered again and again, "I'm sorry." But sorry wasn't enough. Sorry wouldn't bring Chief Obina back. Sorry wouldn't undo the viral video or the pain she caused Chitty. Still, she wrote in her journal, her only companion now, "Today, I wept by the grave of the only man who tried to show me my truth. I slapped him, and that slap was the beginning of my fall. Maybe one day I'll learn how to forgive myself. But not today." She closed the journal and stared at the ceiling, wondering if redemption was still possible, or if she would forever be remembered as the woman who mistook pride for power. Months passed, and the world moved on. Though the scandal of Uju's slap had trended for weeks, it was eventually replaced by newer stories, celebrity breakups, political controversies, and viral dance challenges. But for Uju, time stood still. She had taken up small freelance jobs online to survive, but her once glamorous life was a distant memory. She no longer wore makeup. She rarely left home. Her phone remained silent, save for debt reminders and the occasional scam call. She lived in isolation, haunted by memories and whispers. But nothing pierced her like the news that finally reached her through a forwarded message. Chitty Obina is set to wed his longtime friend and philanthropist, Tolu Adekunle, this Saturday. Attached was a glossy photo of Chitty holding hands with a woman dressed in a modest Ankara gown, smiling with genuine joy. The caption read, "From friendship to forever." Uju stared at the photo for what felt like hours. She traced Chitty's smile with her finger and whispered, "You finally found someone worthy." A part of her wanted to tear the image apart. Another part wanted to frame it. She remembered Tolu vaguely, a soft-spoken girl who used to volunteer with Chitty's charity team. Uju had once mocked her for wearing flats and smelling like tomatoes, not knowing she would be the woman to stand at the altar beside the man Uju once called hers. The news shattered her all over again. The life she once believed was hers, the mansion, the Obina name, the status, had now been given to another woman. But more than the material things, what hurt the most was the look in Chitty's eyes. Peace, joy, love. The kind of look he once gave Uju, but would never again. Not after everything she had done. On the day of the wedding, Uju didn't leave her apartment. She sat by her window, watching cars pass, imagining the celebration happening miles away, the clinking of glasses, the joyful dances, the proud smiles on the Obina family's faces. In her mind, she pictured Tolu being embraced by Chitty's mother, standing beside his siblings and kissing him under a shower of rose petals. And then she saw herself, alone in silence, wrapped in the dark robe of regret. She whispered, "It could have been me," then corrected herself. "No, it should have been me if I had been different." She wept quietly, rocking back and forth, no music playing, no guests arriving. Just her and the weight of what she had lost. And in the distance, wedding bells rang, not as a celebration, but as a cruel reminder that sometimes one mistake is all it takes to lose everything. The days that followed Chitty's wedding were a slow torment for Uju. She no longer had the strength to cry. Her eyes were dried out, her heart weary. She sat on the old sofa in her now sparsely furnished apartment, surrounded by silence, haunted by memories that played like cruel lullabies in her mind. Her phone, once filled with messages and booking requests, now served only as a window to a world that had rejected her. Every time she opened social media, she was greeted with more photos of Chitty and Tolu at their honeymoon in Mauritius, smiling with friends, cutting cake together, dancing under fairy lights. Tolu, in her simplicity and grace, looked like everything Uju had pretended to be. She embodied what Uju had faked. That contrast, authenticity versus performance, was what made Uju's pain feel like poison in her throat. She didn't just lose Chitty. She lost the chance to ever be seen as real, as worthy, as good. One evening, she dug out an old scrapbook she had made when she and Chitty first got engaged. It was filled with printed photos, ticket stubs, dried petals from their first date, and handwritten notes from both of them. She flipped through the pages slowly, pausing at a picture of them at the Obina Foundation launch. Chitty had written beneath it, "With her by my side, there's nothing I can't do." Her lips trembled. How could someone love her that much? And how could she have thrown it away so easily? The truth was hard to face. She didn't just ruin a relationship. She destroyed a man's trust, his dreams, his vision of love. The scrapbook fell from her lap as her body curled into a fetal position, trembling with the weight of memory and misery. She whispered repeatedly, "I was supposed to be the bride," as if saying it aloud would somehow rewrite fate. She began to have dreams, vivid, painful dreams. In one, she stood at the altar in a flowing white gown, but when Chitty turned to face her, it was not joy in his eyes, it was disgust. In another, she sat at the mansion's dining table, surrounded by servants, but every plate was empty, and everyone stared at her with hollow eyes. Her subconscious tormented her, painting the very life she had once desired as a hell she could no longer touch. She started waking up screaming in the middle of the night, sweating, breathless. Her neighbors began to worry. A woman who had once seemed untouchable was now a ghost wandering through shadows of her own mistakes. But she refused help. She didn't want pity. In her mind, she didn't deserve healing. She deserved to suffer. And as each day dragged on, she began to believe that she would never escape the prison her pride had built. The breakdown came not as an explosion, but a quiet unraveling that began in the market. Uju had gone out to buy a few basic items with the last money in her account. Her eyes were tired, her clothes worn, and her body weaker than ever before. She had grown thinner, her cheeks sunken, her hair left unbraided. But even in her diminished state, people recognized her. As she walked through the crowded aisles, whispers followed her like shadows. "That's the one that slapped her fiancé's father. Look at her now. God really humbled her." Some even laughed, nudging each other to get a closer look. Uju tried to hold her head high, but the weight of shame was too heavy. One woman shouted after her, "Next time, slap yourself before others." The crowd erupted in laughter, and that was the final crack. Uju dropped her bag, turned around, and screamed, "Leave me alone. I didn't kill anyone. I just made a mistake." People stopped. Some looked on with pity, others with amusement, but no one moved to help. Uju's voice broke as she shouted again, "How many of you have done worse in private? How many of you beat your house girls, insult beggars, cheat your neighbors, but still walk free because no one caught you? Her eyes were wild now, tears streaming down her face. I've paid for my sin every single day. I live with it. I wake up with it. I sleep with it. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably in the middle of the market. A young boy reached for her bag, and an old woman pushed his hand away, gently covering Uju with a wrapper. Let her be, she said softly. Regret is its own punishment. Eventually, a kind stranger led Uju to a quiet corner and gave her a bottle of water. But even that small act of kindness felt foreign. She whispered, "Why are you helping me?" The woman replied, "Because I've been broken too." The video of her breakdown was recorded by a bystander and uploaded online. It didn't trend like the first one, but it made rounds on WhatsApp groups and small gossip blogs. See what pride causes, they wrote. Some sympathized. Others mocked. But none of it mattered to Uju anymore. She no longer had the strength to be angry, to defend herself, or even to feel insulted. That night, she returned home barefoot, carrying her bag in one hand and her dignity in the other, what little remained. She lay on her bed and stared at the ceiling for hours, her mind blank. There were no tears left, only silence, deep, echoing silence that filled every corner of her soul. She was no longer living. She was merely existing, floating through time with no direction, no hope, and no future. And in that silence, she heard the words again. We don't return evil for evil. But we don't forget. She hadn't just been forgotten by the world. She had been forgotten by herself. Weeks passed, and the world grew colder for Uju. She received a notice of eviction, the final blow to a life already shattered. Her once beautiful apartment was now filled with echoes and dust. She sold her last few valuable possessions, a gold bracelet, a pair of designer heels, and a perfume bottle, for a fraction of their worth. With the money, she paid off what she could and prepared to leave. She packed her things into 2 small bags and stared at the once lavish space where she had rehearsed walking in heels for her imagined wedding. Now it was just a room, 4 walls, and the heavy presence of regret. That evening, she walked to a small roadside charity shelter for women in distress. She filled out a form under the name Uju. Oh, unwilling to spell out the name that once opened doors. The matron gave her a bed, a toothbrush, and a bowl of soup. Welcome, she said. You're safe here. But Uju didn't feel safe. She felt gone. In the shelter, she met women with stories of betrayal, abuse, and abandonment. She listened, she nodded, she even offered comfort. And in those broken voices, she found pieces of herself, and pieces of the people she had once looked down on. One girl named Amaka reminded her of the maid she had slapped months ago. Another reminded her of the housekeeper she once insulted for wearing torn slippers. For the first time, Uju began to see the human behind every role, the story behind every scar. One night Amaka asked her, "Why are you here?" Uju smiled sadly. "Because I thought being above others made me powerful, but it only made me empty." Amaka nodded. "You don't look empty. You look like someone learning how to breathe again." That simple statement stayed with Uju. She began helping around the shelter, cleaning, cooking, and listening. She found small moments of peace, though the pain never left completely. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was a long, endless walk. One morning, she stood by the window, watching the sunrise. Her heart still ached, her eyes still swollen, but her breathing had steadied. The matron walked up to her and said, "There's a school nearby looking for part-time volunteers. Interested?" Uju nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "Yes, I am." That day, as she stepped out of the shelter wearing a borrowed blouse and donated shoes, she realized something. She would never be the woman Chitty married. She would never be welcomed into the Obina mansion again. She would never undo what she had done. But she could be something else, something better. Not out of guilt, but out of growth. She whispered to herself, "This is not the life I wanted, but maybe it's the life I need." And with that, she took her first step into a future built not on pride, but on purpose. Uju now worked as a volunteer teacher in a community school tucked away on the outskirts of town. The school was modest, just 4 buildings with peeling paint, an uneven playground, and broken chalkboards. But to the children, it was a sanctuary. To Uju, it became a second chance. Each morning, she arrived before the others, helping sweep the dusty floors, fill the water barrels, and prepare simple breakfast packs for the children who came hungry. The woman who once stormed through marble-floored mansions now walked barefoot across cracked cement without complaint. But despite the outward transformation, an unhealed scar remained inside her, a permanent reminder of the life she lost and the heart she broke. She rarely spoke of her past. Most people in the school only knew her as Auntie Uju, a gentle woman who smiled often, cried quietly, and gave her all to children who had nothing. But late at night, when the world was quiet and her room was dark, Uju still heard the echoes of her downfall. The slap, the shame, the headlines, the laughter of strangers in the market, the face of Chief Obinna as she struck him, the weight of her mother's voice saying, even if he was a cleaner, you had no right to slap anyone. These memories lived in her bones. On the anniversary of Chief Obinna's death, she made it a ritual to fast in silence and write a letter to him. Letters she never sent, only folded and burned in a small clay bowl beside her bed. One such night, after a long day of teaching, she sat at her wooden desk, scribbling painfully in a battered journal. I am not asking for a new beginning, only for peace before my end. I'm no longer the woman I once was, but I'm still learning to forgive the girl who did all those things. She ruined me. She ruined everything. When she finished, she wiped her tears and went to bed, unaware that this would be her last letter. The next morning, her students waited. She didn't come. One of the older girls, Amara, whom Uju had helped through an abusive home situation, knocked on her door. No answer. The neighbors called the school director. When they entered the small room, they found Uju lying peacefully on the bed, her eyes closed, her journal open to her last page. She had passed quietly in the night. No signs of struggle, no visible pain. Just a woman finally at rest after carrying the crushing weight of regret for too long. The school mourned her. The children wept. News spread slowly, but not virally. There were no hashtags this time. No headlines. No laughter. Just the quiet sobs of children who had lost someone who loved them unconditionally. At her burial, a small wooden cross was planted at her grave with simple words carved by hand. Uju, oh, she fell from pride, but rose in service. And beneath the soil, the woman who once sought status in gold finally found peace in humility. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.